When police were called on a woman for simply walking, no one expected her next move. In seconds, the roles reversed, and the truth shook everyone watching. The afternoon sun hung low, spilling golden light across the quiet suburban street. Lawns shimmered with a fresh trim, mailboxes stood in perfect rows, and the air was heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine. It was the kind of neighborhood that prided itself on order and familiarity, where anything outside the routine drew silent stares. Down the sidewalk, a woman walked with calm certainty. Her stride was neither hurried nor hesitant, her posture tall, her presence commanding in its quiet simplicity. She carried a folder tucked neatly under her arm, the edges of official-looking papers peeking from its corner. Her attire was modest yet polished, pressed slacks, a crisp blouse, and shoes that tapped rhythmically against the pavement. From a distance, she might have seemed unremarkable. But there was something about her, a poise, a steadiness, that demanded attention without a word. Behind lace curtains and half-cracked blinds, eyes followed her every step. Some with idle curiosity, others with suspicion they could not quite name. The silence of the street carried a tension just beneath its surface, as if waiting for something to happen. Peaceful as it seemed, the golden light masked an unease already beginning to stir. Behind a window draped in lace curtains, a shadow shifted. A neighbor, clutching a mug that had long since gone cold, pressed closer to the glass. Their breath fogged the pain as they squinted, watching the woman on the sidewalk. Her steps were steady, deliberate, too deliberate, the neighbor thought. Not hurried, not wandering, almost as if she belonged there. But they didn't recognize her face. And in a place like this, unfamiliar faces were enough to rattle nerves. A whisper stirred in the neighbor's mind. Stranger. Danger. The thought pulsed like an alarm, drowning out reason. Fingers trembling slightly, they reached for the phone. Yes. Their voice wavered as they spoke into the receiver. I'd like to report a suspicious person walking in the neighborhood. Outside, the woman's stride never faltered. Her eyes scanned the street as though measuring distances, as if her presence had purpose. The folder beneath her arm shifted slightly with her movement, hinting at something important inside. Yet, to the unseen caller, none of this mattered. The hum of the late afternoon remained unbroken, but a quiet storm had already been set in motion, one fueled by fear and by a dangerous misjudgment. The quiet hum of the neighborhood shattered with the sudden wail of sirens. Tires screeched against the pavement as 2 patrol cars rolled to a stop, their lights washing the street in harsh red and blue. The golden warmth of the afternoon dimmed beneath the strobing colors, and one by one, doors cracked open. Neighbors stepped out onto porches, whispers buzzing like restless bees. The woman halted mid-stride, the folder still tucked beneath her arm. Her shadow stretched long in the flashing lights, but she did not shrink. 2 officers emerged, their boots heavy against the asphalt. Their hands hovered near their belts, tension sharp in the set of their shoulders. "Ma'am," one called out, his voice edged with suspicion. "What exactly are you doing here?" The question sliced through the air, demanding justification for a walk on a public street, but the woman didn't falter. Her chin lifted slightly, her gaze steady, unflinching under the weight of their eyes. There was no panic, no stammer, only calm. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asked, her voice controlled, smooth as stone against the current of suspicion. In that moment, the balance of power felt strangely uncertain, waiting to tip. The silence after her question hung heavy, as if the whole street had paused to listen. "Is there a problem, officers?" The words left her lips with a calm so deliberate it unsettled them more than any protest might have. For a split second, the officers hesitated. They had expected excuses, maybe fear, anything but this steady poise. One officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner as if to confirm what he was seeing. Around them, the crowd of neighbors leaned closer, their whispers swelling, feeding the tension. The woman's eyes did not waver. She stood rooted, as if the ground itself held her in place, her expression unreadable but unyielding. Then, with unhurried grace, she adjusted the folder under her arm. The flap slipped open, revealing a glimpse inside. papers crisp and neatly arranged, and the glint of something metallic, something official. It was only for a breath, but enough for the officers to notice. An ID badge, partially concealed, reflected the dying sunlight. The shape was unmistakable to trained eyes, yet too fleeting for certainty. The moment stretched taut, like the final note of a song waiting to resolve. Suspicion flickered, but so did recognition. Something about her presence no longer felt ordinary. The lead officer's eyes narrowed as the faint glint caught his attention. For a moment he froze, his breath caught in his chest. Then recognition struck like a jolt of electricity. His jaw tightened, and the stiffness in his shoulders shifted into something else. Disbelief. The woman, unhurried, reached into her folder and drew out the badge fully. The sun caught it this time, making it impossible to mistake. Gold, official, authority etched in every line. The street fell utterly silent. The neighbor's whispers cut off mid-syllable. The younger officer's hand slid nervously away from his belt, his gaze darting between the badge and her face. A flush crept up his neck as the realization sank in. She was no stranger, no outsider, no suspicious figure. She was their precinct commander. The weight of the moment pressed on everyone. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, the kind that spoke volumes. Shame, fear, and the sting of knowing they had made a grave misstep. From the window across the street, the neighbor who had made the call stumbled back. Their phone slipped from trembling fingers and clattered onto the floor. Disbelief widened their eyes, the truth crashing over them with crushing clarity. The transformation was immediate. Suspicion drained from the officers' faces, replaced by a strained respect that bordered on shame. Their postures softened, hands falling stiffly to their sides as if to erase the tension they themselves had created. The lead officer cleared his throat, his earlier authority faltering. "Commander, He stumbled over the words, clumsy in his attempt at apology. She did not move, did not rush to ease their discomfort. Instead, she stood steady, the badge gleaming in her hand, her presence commanding without effort. Her eyes lingered on each of them, not with anger, but with a weight that pressed deeper than raised voices ever could. "Next time," she said evenly, her voice calm but unshakable. "Remember, not every black woman walking down the street is a suspect." The words hung in the air, echoing through the silence of the street. Neighbors who had gathered outside shifted uneasily, some lowering their eyes, others holding their breath. And yet, her tone carried no malice, only quiet strength. It was not meant to wound, but to remind, to teach. In that moment, authority was redefined, not by the flashing lights or the uniforms, but by dignity that refused to bend. As the patrol cars idled quietly, and the crowd of neighbors slowly retreated behind their doors, the street returned to stillness. Yet the silence was no longer the same. It carried weight, the kind that lingers after truth has been laid bare. The woman tucked her badge back into the folder, her movements calm and deliberate, as though she had nothing left to prove. She resumed her walk, her steps as steady as when she first arrived, leaving behind officers whose pride had been pierced by their own assumptions. From the window, the neighbor who had made the call remained frozen, staring at the spot where she had stood. What had begun as fear now twisted into shame, a realization too sharp to ignore, a judgment made in haste, rooted not in facts but in prejudice. The lesson was clear, spoken not only in her words but in the dignity with which she carried herself. True authority, the kind that commands respect, is not always worn on a uniform or shouted through sirens. Sometimes it is found in quiet strength, revealed when ignorance dares to challenge it. And in that golden afternoon, dignity had shone brighter than suspicion ever could.